Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening. Welcome to Live Real Talk. My name is Feisal Kassim, your host this evening. Now, after what appeared to be a quagmire between the educationists and the Ministry of Education, finally a direction has been given through the Ministry of Education. The CS, that is Dr. Professor Magoha, came out and announced that schools will be reopened, of course in phases, starting from the 12th of October. The first phase is expected to kickstart. I'm talking about the Form 4 in the secondary level, Class 8 and Grade 4. And tonight to talk about this, I'm having Sheikh Yusuf Morocco, who's a counselor, and Molimu Jasper Ondimo from the Lad Academy, who's an education expert and a teacher by profession. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, gentlemen, and thanks so much for making time for us this evening.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi.
Mwalimu Jasper, thank you so much for making time for us this evening as well. And amani ya Mungu iwe nawe.
Amin.
That's basically the translation of Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you. Yes. Now, gentlemen, I'm going to start with you, Mwalimu Jasper. The CS has announced that we go back to schools from the 12th of October. Of course, something that has developed mixed reactions. From where you are sitting, what do you think? Are we ready?
First, Feisal, thank you for inviting me to your studio. I totally appreciate. On the issue that you've raised about the opening of schools, that is the sudden announcement by the CS that schools reopen on Monday. That announcement or that circular caught many off guard. Many were expecting that it was going to take longer before schools open. Remember when we had the stakeholders conference at KICC, and the president said that before we open schools, we must first try to implement how. And so many people thought that reopening schools was pushed to January. So it was really a shocker to many parents, to many teachers, school proprietors, that schools are going to open on Monday, which is quite unfortunate because according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, 1.5 million Kenyans have lost their jobs. Most companies are struggling. Most businesses are struggling, and therefore it was quite insensitive for the government to give a notice of 1 week to open schools.
As education experts, were you consulted until this decision was reached?
Nobody was consulted. This decision caught off guard even the stakeholders, the technical committee that was advising the CS. Everybody was really in darkness as far as this decision is concerned. So I can call it a sudden decision that was reached by the CS. We really don't know what informed this decision. Of course, every parent wants to see his or her child in school, but the timing and when to report in school is what now is bringing issues.
Mwalimu, we can get to that, but again, a few weeks ago, last week, but when we interviewed CAS of Education, that is Mheshimiwa Mumina Bonai, and she categorically said that they were consulting stakeholders. Anyway, we're going to get to that, as my producer and director this evening will be looking for that footage of Mumina Bonai, Dr. Mumina Bonai. We're going to play it here and hear her telling us that they were consulting the experts. In the meantime, Sheikh Yusuf Morocco, who's a counselor and also an educationist to some extent, my teacher, Mwalimu, CS has announced that we go back to schools from the 12th of October. What's your take on that?
Thank you very much, Faisal. Thank you very much for inviting me once more. Personally, I like being neutral, you know that, because at the end of the day, we may not be in a position of the CS. We don't know exactly what position the CS was in. However, the truth be told, that many were caught, if not all, many were caught off guard. My position is that I have a feeling that parents were not prepared. Stakeholders were not prepared, especially school owners. I'm talking about private schools association, for example. I feel like they were not prepared. And as my friend has said, the fact that the president said we will do more of preparation, many thought maybe it will take one month or 2 months, or probably because the year is almost ending, it will come next year. My take is that it has caught many off guard, and I will speak from the psychological point of view. I feel like even we were at the time when we were trying to recover from the COVID-19, you know, the effects of the COVID-19, opening of the school has become like a shocker again. And I want to believe many are going to suffer psychologically. It is going to affect us mentally. And I'm looking at a way that a parent who had lost a job in Nairobi and therefore decided to move all the way to Siaya, for example, he has a kid in grade 4 and no any other class. So this parent will be forced to travel all the way back to Nairobi. Maybe the kid is in Olympic Primary School, just because of this kid, and he was not prepared. Maybe he has not paid rent. He had not communicated with the landlord. So my feeling here is that it is going to cause more of mental instability than even preparation to go back to school.
Well, from what I'm getting from both of you, you are basing your facts on preparation. What exactly are you looking at preparation? Because if you're looking at the circular and the speech of C.S. Magoha, there are a number of things that he said. One, that all learning institutions will be required to mandatorily enforce stricter adherence to COVID-19 health measures and protocols. All university and tertiary institutions that had been designated quarantine centers should be fumigated. Basically, there are a number of things. So if you're talking about preparation, what exactly do you mean? Because this is some sort of a vague statement that you're using. What, to our viewers, for the benefit of those who don't know, what exactly do you mean by preparation?
Thank you, Feisal. That is not really an ambiguous statement. When you talk about preparation in the Kenyan context, there are some basics that we ought to have done, because schools closed in March, and then we expected the government to be able to address even some of the inequalities, some of the problems that have been bedeviling the education sector. Anybody was wishing that this was the perfect opportunity for the government to address that issue. I want to give you an example of Mandera, Garissa, Marsabit counties, where teachers had fled that particular region. And before COVID, the learners in those particular places were not learning. So even when schools are opening, those learners are not going to find teachers in school. TSC could have taken that as a perfect opportunity to ensure that these, the North Frontier District, as it was previously known, sends teachers there. And then there is issue about infrastructure. We have our kids who are still studying under trees. There is an issue of social distancing. It was really interesting that the CS in point number 2 of his circular says that as far as social distancing is concerned, there is no principal who should send children home because of social distancing. In other words, we've already thrown in the towel. Therefore, the preparations, let me enumerate them. Number one, it is infrastructure in schools. That is additional classes. We've seen severally in various media outlets how kids are learning under trees in dilapidated classrooms. Then you have the issue of even resources in school. These are textbooks. Some kids have never seen textbooks in the Republic of Kenya. Then there is the issue about the thermal guns. The ministry is telling the schools to enforce those particular protocols, but there is no money. It is not accompanying that statement with money. The principals, until yesterday, they were beseeching the government to send the funds. So the government ought to have been proactive. First say, we have sent funds to school so that the principals are going to prepare for opening.
But honestly, Mwalimu, these are problems that have been existing even pre-COVID. Why are we seriously now putting the blame, why are we pointing at COVID situation now for all these situations or predicaments that have been facing the education system from before? These are things that have been happening even before COVID.
Faisal, that is why I said that we expected that the government was going to use this break to ensure that we solve these particular problems. We can't really say because these problems have been there, so we cannot solve them, so they should continue bedeviling our children, so that they should continue being in our schools. We have every responsibility as Kenyans, as the media, to press for these particular reforms in the education sector.
Interesting. Mr. Yusuf Maroka, Sheikh Yusuf Maroka, I'd love to hear your input on the same.
Preparation as far as COVID-19, going back to school is concerned, I think it's more of COVID-19 related issues than preparation, as you're talking about books. It's like Kenyans, we are now used to study without books. We are not used to study. We are used to study without infrastructure. You saw the other day schools are submerged in water. So these are not big issues right now, according to me. To me, the government is not looking at this per se, but it's looking at preparation as far as COVID-19 safety is concerned. And to me, it is also a big, I don't know if we will manage it. I'm talking of 1.5, we are talking of 1.5 meter social distance. These are kids, we know some high schools have up to 200, 300 Form 4 students alone, actually more. We are talking of washrooms being less than maybe 8 in that school. We are talking of these kids sharing dormitories. We are talking of these kids being in the same classroom with teachers. Now maybe one stream has to be split into several streams again. My concern here is how prepared are we in terms of availability of the PPEs, availability of all the required, the sanitizers, water availability in schools, and even the caregivers. Have we employed enough caregivers? How will the alarm raised, Faisal? Assuming a student has been tested and the temperature is 39 and maybe he has some flu, basically the COVID-19 symptoms, how will that alarm be raised? For example, if it is blown out of proportion, does it mean students will get confused, they'll have to run up and down, maybe parents will have to withdraw students immediately from the school? So these are some of the things that I have a feeling even teachers, maybe they could have been taken through some kind of training maybe before students are asked to go back to school. Interesting.
So am I getting a mutual feeling from both of you that it's not the time to open the schools?
I may say it has come abruptly. It may be the right time, but it has come abruptly. And there are so many questions, Faisal, from parents. Personally, I've received so many texts, so many calls, some of which I can't even answer, from parents. How, when, how? The question here is, we could have addressed this systematically. Parents, we may open school this time. You are required to do ABCD, get prepared. This is how you are going to prepare your learners before they leave home to school. This is how you're going to contact the school in case of ABCD. This is the contact person. I think even teachers could have been given maybe time to regroup themselves and each teacher to have a number of students. We are dealing with the pandemic, Faisal. And there is high chance that we may have a second wave, and it may come in a very, find us very unprepared. So for me, I have a feeling like as much as we may be prepared, I know we have teachers who actually they depend on teaching and they've been home for long. So going back to school is a sign of there is light at the end of the tunnel. But at the same time, we may be getting into a worse situation because we are not prepared psychologically. I'm looking at a situation as a teacher, I'm on duty, I'm at the entrance, I have to test, I have to use the thermo, maybe I don't even know how it is used. At the same time, this child has some signs. What do I do? Who do I call? Okay, how do I go closer? After that, where will I go as a teacher because I was closer to this child? So what kind of face mask standard are we going to use? So these are some of the things, according to me, we are not prepared.
Thank you. Mwalimu, what do you think? Are you saying that this is not the right time to open the school?
Thank you, Faisal. I read the UNICEF report on reopening of schools in African countries, and I can say that UNICEF detailed several reasons why schools should be opened, because it said that some of the children who are suffering before COVID, right now, they are suffering more. Some of the problems that were already existing before, right now, the problems have escalated. And UNICEF urged African governments to open their schools. In the context of Kenya, I think until the CS announced the date for reopening, Kenya was the only country that had not decided when to open schools, something that was very, very strange. So everybody was in for the reopening, but It could have been done in a more palatable way. It could have been done in a more, I can say, organized manner. Give the parents notice. Parents are not like machines that you just mechanically order that can you take your children to school. Some of these parents are afraid, and I expected the CS of Education to appear in the steps of Jogo House, being flanked by the stakeholders in the Ministry of Education, and talk to the parents systematically, telling them why reopening is necessary. But sending a very short circular to schools was really escapist of the CS, and it is really unacceptable for that particular conduct.
So what I just want to understand, do you mean that it is not the right time to open the schools yet?
It is the right time to open schools. Okay. I think all is not lost. The ministry still has an opportunity to recover that particular confidence that had been lost. This includes, for example, they should address the psychosocial system. That is what Sheikh was talking about here. So in Uganda, just a minute, in Uganda, they took almost 2 weeks taking the parents through psychosocial support. But here in Kenya, the learners are being told report to school, teachers are told report to school without the necessary preparations. We do agree that reopening schools was the best thing the Ministry of Education did. But what we are taking a swipe against the ministry is opening schools in a very short notice. That one is completely unacceptable. So
no one is objecting the fact that schools are being reopened at this time. No one is objecting that directive from the government, right?
Personally, no.
Thank you. Mwalimu as well. No one is objecting, correct?
Feisal, I may not really belabor this particular point. I'm saying that the reopening, the ministry has already announced that the schools should be opened, but we must expect several bottlenecks to the reopening. And come Monday, we might actually see a lot of or high absenteeism in schools. So reopening is a good thing, but the way it is done, it is the one that you're saying it is unacceptable.
Thanks so much for that answer. And this is where we take our first break. When we get back, what is that the government did not do? Talk of consultation. Talk of what's the worst that can happen if we are going back to school, of which, I mean, the government has said, CS Mago has said, so definitely we are going back to schools. Let's see and talk about this and much more after the break. I'm your host, Feisal Kassim. Please don't touch that dial. Let me have my cup of water. See you after the break.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation. Verse of the day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن 7 سماوات وهو بكل شيء عليم.
The unfolding truth.
Islamic literature,
yes,
they did not even agree with him, and that's why they tried to kill him.
They tried to kill him.
That aside, let's come back.
Not
here.
even tried, they finally did so.
You say they killed him?
Yes.
We will revisit that.
What do you really know about Islam? Is it Allah? Is it Jehovah?
O Yahweh.
All belong to one God.
Join us as we clear the misconceptions in religion on Horizon TV.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome back. Thank you so much for keeping it live, Real Talk. And we are talking about matters education. Schools are reopening. Now, talk from the parents' perspective. We've spoken about preparation. First, before we talk about parents' perspective on this, that Sheikh Yusuf Maroka has touched on briefly, let's talk about the best time, or rather what needed to be done until schools are reopened. We've seen countries before, Japan, France, South Africa, and the list goes on and on. Countries that have opened schools before and they have closed schools after that, which some of the countries, including the UK, they have gone through a second lockdown because the numbers increased once more when the schools reopened. Now, I'm going to start with you, Sheikh Yusuf Maroka, who's a counselor. What do you think could have been done, or should have been done, or should be done at this time before we fully reopen schools?
Sheikh Feisal, thank you very much. I keep on saying this, that the mental status of Kenyans, we were still in the stigma of we are still actually suffering the pandemic. We haven't, because as he said, another 1 point something million Kenyans lost their jobs. Others lost their loved ones. Others, their loved ones are still sick. Some of them include those parents who have kids in schools. What the government could have done here, the way we are doing a lot of, creating awareness on social media, televisions, this is what the government should have done first. Bringing parents on board slowly, creating that awareness, because currently parents, first of all, they are fighting to go back to find jobs. They're trying to go back to their workplace. They're trying to find if they can collect ABCD to collect some money. So the issue of students going back to school was not in their minds. So what the government should have done, number one, was to create awareness, citing and using those countries that you mentioned as examples. Like they did ABCD, ABCD happened. Now we need to do ABCD. Number two, creating awareness also to the students themselves, because these are kids, these are youngsters, they are hyper. I'm trying to imagine when they come back to school, they report on Monday, assuming they have reported on Monday, that period that they've been far away from each other, the way they will, I don't know how we are going to control that. That is my concern. I don't know how we are going to control that. So there was need for the government to, whatever the stakeholders they're talking about, to be close to parents, to engage even private schools associations, owners of the private schools, and then maybe we should have started with parents, inviting them on virtual learning, or even inviting them to school and having some discussions, and then slowly it goes to students, and then other workers like that, slowly by slowly. When the government now had to announce that the school is being open ABCD date, it could be easier for the parents, students, and other stakeholders, because they have been engaged. But right now it's like we have just skipped or jumped from one pandemic to another one, whereby we are speaking today, one parent was asking me so many questions. What will happen? What will they eat, for example? Will they eat from the cafe? Or what, these are some of the questions we need to address. It's a boarding school. Will they, who will prepare food for them? How will they take lunch? How will they sleep? These are things that the government should have done earlier enough, especially during this period where we were waiting for the opening of the school. There's another question coming, like what criteria was used to leave a third-year student or a Form 3 student and engage a grade 4 student? Okay, we know grade 4, they are doing their last exam, but in terms of age and exposure to the risk, is it a grade 4 who is going to be exposed to the risk of COVID-19, or a Form 3 student, or a third-year student in the university, Mr. Feisal?
Thanks so much. Mwalimu, what's the worst that can happen, assuming the government has not put all these things into place? What's the worst that can happen looking into the future?
Thank you. For me, I don't predict a doomsday. I think COVID has been very kind to African states as well as the Asian states. Apart from South Africa and partially Egypt, there is no country in Africa that has experienced a second wave of COVID-19. There were a few cases in Cameroon, about 14 of them, but they were easily contained in their schools. So for me, I really do not think that we are likely to have really numbers going up. And health experts have told us that children account for 2.5% of COVID-19 infections. So really, I don't expect a doomsday. Let us allow the kids to go to school. We've seen the kids in Tanzania. They reported to school earlier than other African states, and we've not seen bodies lying all over schools. I mean, so for me, I really don't predict a doomsday. It is time that we settled down and did what we expected to do. There's a particular person who said in a newspaper that I read something, I can call it hilarious. He said that COVID-19 is a mild flu that has been blown out of proportion by the media and the profiteers. And I think that might make some sense. You look at even in the US, Donald Trump, I mean, after he contracted COVID-19, he was there encouraging the people that you can defeat this virus, you don't have to fear. I think there is a lot of fear which has been instilled among the Kenyans, which is unnecessary. So let us allow the kids to go back to school, and the government should ensure that they are putting in the correct mechanism to arrest the situation in case it arises. For example, I mean, what are the guidelines if a student is infected with COVID-19 or has tested positive for COVID-19? What is the next step? Are all teachers going to go home? Are all students going to go home? So there is a lot that is not clear until now, which we might pay a huge price for.
Thank you so much. Interesting enough that we mentioned about consultation in the beginning of the show, and my producer was looking for that clip of Dr. Mumina Bonaya, who is the CS Chief Administrative Secretary in the Ministry of Education, who confirmed that they had consulted or were consulting education's expert. Suleiman Nachasa, let's play that video.
And these options we've given is going to a larger group for consultations once again. And from there, it goes to the head of state.
Okay.
So we are waiting to hear from the authority.
Okay. I mean, there you go. She said it, that she consulted you. So if you tell me that you're not consulted, even the technical team on education was not consulted, then we fail to understand. And Kenyans, so HorizonTV viewers, fail to understand as well. Anyway, moving on to comments on YouTube, a number of comments streaming in. Yes,
I wanted to weigh in on what the CS is actually saying, and that is completely unacceptable. Right now, the parents are really suffering. So when they have said they have they consulted the parents who are crying all over the media that it is the notice is too short? Had they consulted the students who are the main target in this particular
Which student
context?
will agree to
So
go back to school
therefore,
if you
when
consult?
she says that the stakeholders were consulted, That is really dishonest.
Which student will agree to go back to school if you consult them?
Most students, especially the candidates, are really eager to go back to school so that they get over these 844 things. So most of them are really happy going back to school.
Oh my.
Faisal, let me add
yes,
something.
Modi. Yes,
Let me add something on that.
Yes.
Okay, let us accept that they consulted.
Okay.
We don't know whom they consulted.
Fair enough.
We are dealing with the owners of the school, and they are the same people crying, saying that we were not consulted. So possibly, let us agree, maybe they consulted more experts that we don't know, maybe health sectors, and that is accepted. My concern here is, it is 2 days to opening of schools, meaning on Monday. I don't know, maybe some students have started traveling even today. I'm looking at situation in our terminus. You know, Kenyans, what will happen in our matatu industry? I'm looking at that. I'm looking at a situation, how many schools have been fumigated so far? Or deep cleaned? Some use deep cleaned. I don't know what it means so far. How many? I have not seen, even here in Horizon, I have not seen on any media that they have captured a school being fumigated. So what preparation are there, as we are speaking, to welcome these students back to school?
Interesting. Fair questions that, I mean, I wish they were here to answer these questions. Walimu has said that if the students would be consulted, they would have agreed to go back to school. Interesting enough. A comment, Kaed Eddie, I think it's Kad or Ked or Kaed Eddie, says hatutaki shule. And he has repeated this twice. Hatutaki shule.
Thank you, Faisal. I have really talked to a couple of students from my school and other schools. Most of them are really tired staying at home. Yeah, there could be a number that are unwilling to go back to school because, I mean, 844 has been a burden to most learners. But especially the candidates, most of them are really eager to go back to school. And as they say, kwa lugha mtaani, mambo ishe. So they want to finish. I like to differ with what Sheikh was saying about the fumigation of schools. I think about 5 days ago, we saw fumigation taking place in various schools in the country. So that one has been done. Perhaps what has not been done is, I mean, we are not seeing the health protocols which are being propagated by the government being implemented in the schools. So that one I think we haven't done until right now. Now, I'd like to make this particular point that as Kenyans, we must really show outrage against our leaders for making decisions that do not really they don't have us in mind. You look at the case of the United States of America, where President Trump was pushing the governors to open schools. In Tanzania, Magufuli was leading efforts to open schools. In Uganda, about 2 weeks ago, President Museveni was addressing the media and enumerating step by step how they are going to open schools. In the Republic of Kenya, the president has never mentioned anything to do with education. I think the CS has been left in a very tight corner of flip-flopping. So education is so serious that it cannot be left to very few individuals. The president needs to address the Republic of Kenya on the state of education and the plan way forward to recover all that had been lost during this particular time of COVID-19.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Fauzia. Odega on Facebook says, Assalamu alaikum. Ngare Dennis says, not ready at all. I suppose and I assume you mean the students and the teachers and the stakeholders in the learning industry are not ready at all. And Otto Sifuna says, my colleague Jasper Ondimo should know that learners were never consulted. They were ambushed to report back to school in less than 4 days' time. They were never consulted. I mean, which learner would be consulted? And this brings us to the last question tonight. In the same report of UNICEF report that highly recommended schools to be reopened, it captured as well a number of students who had started their own businesses and are not willing to go back to school, not mentioning the high rise of teenage pregnancies, especially in Kenya. In a number of counties, teenage pregnancies has been on the rise. How are we going to deal with this? Starting with you, Councillor Sheikh Yusuf Morocco. How are we going to deal with this moving forward?
In fact, that is what I wanted to add on what there is one student who said that tutaki shule. Given the fact that we have stayed at home for quite long, we have learned new tactics. It's like a river that the normal stream, the mainstream has been blocked, so it had to look for other means. And I want to assure you, personally, I know of a number of students who have started groups that they have been visiting, orphanages and other needy people. So it seems like to them, they feel like we had started to venture into another world, and therefore going back to school is going to stop us from doing ABCD. However, I want to say this, that as much as maybe you have started your own business or you are doing other things, going back to school, you have to complete your studies. It is important. You don't have to stop halfway. It is possible that maybe some students have engaged in businesses and other things, but that does not stop one from learning, Feisal. We have young entrepreneurs who they do their own businesses, they venture into other areas of earning money, but still they are in school. So that one does not stop them from going back to school. Maybe I may say the school administration and stakeholders may now look into education. Maybe this is an opportunity for education sector in Kenya to look into education from a different perspective. We have been used to whiteboard or chalkboard and paperwork and maybe face-to-face. Maybe I'm looking forward into seeing some people are going to get into online. Virtual learning is going to be part of this education system. We are going into a situation where parents or learners will be allowed maybe to participate in learning virtually without being physically in school. So we may say yes, they have started their own businesses, but at the same time learning should go on, and they should be prepared. Even though they were not consulted, sometimes there is difference between stakeholder and maybe policy makers. So you may be a stakeholder, but you're not a policy maker. So at the same time, don't blame policy makers for not consulting you for everything. So sometimes you have to follow what the policy makers have done, provided it is for the benefit of all.
Thanks so much. Mwalimu, just on Ndimo, what's your take on that? Number of students who have started their own businesses and the teenage pregnancies. How are we going to deal with that moving forward?
Thank you, Feisal, for that question. Indeed, that demonstrates the drawbacks of 844. That 844 does not recognize special abilities, does not recognize something that is against the curriculum. Because you look at other countries like the US, a kid can be going to school up to around midday, and then in the afternoon the kid will go to work. But here in Kenya, we see that as a crime. Going to work and yet you are in school. I understand the psychological impact that has, but it is time that we start recognizing some of these abilities of the learners. Right now we are talking about high unemployment in Kenya, and some of these learners are highly talented, and as a country we need to be creative on how we can integrate those particular special abilities into the curriculum, because that can be able to solve unemployment in Kenya. Yesterday I saw a photo of several teachers who are lining up for interviews, I think in Kapsabet boys, and there were more than 500 teachers. If these particular teachers were able to create jobs for themselves, then we will be able to reduce unemployment rate. So I think, generally speaking, the ministry ought to have come with several policies to ensure that whatever has been happening during this particular COVID-19 is integrated to the curriculum. Take an example of online classes. Some schools have been doing online classes. So the ministry ought to have had a policy regarding online classes. How do we integrate all this particular stuff that the kids were doing to the curriculum? So that is why the government is pushing for the introduction of CBC to ensure that all the abilities of learners are considered. So thank you so much. And lastly, as I wind up, Feisal, my take is to the government, especially the CS Magoha, to be considerate about the parents. Right now, we have other classes that haven't reported. The CS should make the dates very clear in advance, perhaps 1 month notice, so that the parents are prepared. Kenya is a third world country. Most people are living behind the poverty line. Sometimes we might be academic about these matters in studio here, but if you go to places like Pumwani, like Kibra, then you really shed tears. So it is high time that the government starts to think about the common man and make policies that favor all of us.
There is this segment which has not been touched, Faisal. The teenage,
yes, Pauline, go ahead. Go ahead.
The teenage pregnancy.
Yes.
That is a repercussion. We should expect something like that, of course, because learners went home and then they were not engaged, and there is that freedom. And one thing, Faisal, I have been both in town and in the village during this pandemic period, and learners or kids, I can say below 15 or 18 years were totally unengaged. There was no anything like creating awareness. It was freedom everywhere. Since it has happened, there is nothing we can do so far. Those who maybe it happened in one or the other, by now I think they have done, they're done with that, because, or they're almost, their D-Day. They can be allowed to breastfeed for a few months and then go back to school, or now opt for virtual learning, whereby they can learn while still at home.
Are we there yet as a country? Are we? What exactly? I think it's still in Swahili what you'd call a kitendawili that yet to be tegwad, yeah? Of course, by tegwad, yeah? Yeah, it's a kitendawili that's still yet to be tegwad, of course, by the stakeholders. Talk of the Ministry of Education, talk of the teachers, and all the stakeholders in the education industry. I'm going to give you each 30 seconds each to give your parting shot as you're wrapping up this show this evening. Starting with you, Mwalimu Jasper.
Thank you, Faisal. Mine is to talk to the teachers. I know life is very tough for you. Some of you have not been on salary for 7 months right now. Some of you traveled back to the village, and now you have been requested to come back within a notice of 5 days. Please do come back. Help the learners adjust psychologically. Do not cascade your stress to the learners. Be their support system so that at the end of the day, they shall be able to have their lives in order. So the teachers, please do your best. We know that it is really tough to everybody, but I know that a good teacher will always ensure that the potential of his or her learners are realized. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Sheikh Yusuf Morocco.
Thank you very much, Faisal. Mine is to parents. Remember, in psychology, there is what we call now living in the new normal. And don't take time to adjust. But this pandemic has taught us a lesson, and we should be very fast in adjusting into the new normal. And don't allow pressure to overtake your mental status. Work on your mental health. Be prepared. Work with what you can afford. Don't pressure yourself too much. If it is to report to school, if you have a kid in grade 4, if you have a kid in class 8 or form 4, please prepare this kid at home. Let him or her know that he or she is going to report to school. Get prepared and be ready to live within the new normal.
Thank you so much. And I think, thanks so much, gentlemen, for making time for us this evening. And I think it's time to wrap up the show before these students come and start demonstrating. I can see Sabrina Bidheri says, "What's up, Tasha too lazy?" Says, "Hatutaki shule." It's like they're doing an online demonstration and picketing on our YouTube and Facebook comments. Now, a number of things happen to you in your life. This is going to be our ticket to slumber tonight. Of course, my crew is making fun of my belly. No worry, it's a matter of time. Tutamalizana nayo. Now, our ticket to slumber tonight. A number of things will happen to you in life. Some of them you can control, others you can't. But guess what? There is one thing that you can control. How you react to everything that's happening to you in life. Always know that there are things that you can control. Whatever is being said to you, what is being done to you, what is being thrown at you. There are some that you can control, and there are others that you cannot control. So do not waste your time with those that you cannot control, and focus on that which you can control, and remember that you ultimately decide how you react to them. I've been your host, Feisal Kassim, and this has been the Live Real Talk, an amazing show. As always, see you next week, same place, same time, as we discuss another interesting topic that you want to hear. Thanks so much for keeping us company. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Asanteni sana.
Thank you.